Welcome back, players and collectors, to my channel, RensCollectibles. If you're new here, I'm Ren, and today we have a very cool deck tech breakdown of my most recent deck I used in the Nostalgix online Discord tournament, which landed me in the championship game. So this deck is pretty good, it's pretty fast-paced, and I kind of wanted to break it down for you guys and show you guys what a deck could look like, even without a lot of tricks, a lot of stops, and if you just want to full send with some power, this is your deck. Let's get into it. All right, here is my deck. This is the DDR deck, the Dance Dance Revolution deck, and you'll find out why in just a minute. But we're gonna start off with none other than the hero of the deck, Neo Delios. Now, Neo Delios is a new hero from Harmonic Surge. Once during your turn, you may pay 1 mana to summon a 1 health, 1 attack mech token. So this was pretty useful. The mech tokens actually came in pretty handy. It was a lot less to do with them being mechs and more so to do with they could attack, is why I picked this. But Neo Delios was the hero for this one. And then we jump into our first line of fighters, arguably some of the most important fighters in our deck here. We have Afri, and we have 4 copies of her in this deck. Now, Afri is not a dancer, she's a demon, but she is really, really good. She's a 2-drop card with 3 life, and her ability is once per turn, you may discard a card from your hand to give another fighter charge. That was key. That is the big key for this deck, to get it really going fast. And if you watch Jonesy's battle with me for the championship, then you'll see that this played a very pivotal part in me competing and kind of winning at least one of the games. Next up, we have Afrita, who is the evolution of Afri. So she kind of does the same thing. Once per turn, you may discard a card from your hand to give another fighter charge plus and +2 attack. So she powers something up even more, which is phenomenal for a 4 cost. My only issue was that I did not draw them very much. I don't know what it was. I just could not get Afrita in my hand to save my life. This would have worked well if she was a 3-drop to fit in with Mabarina, but alas, she's not a 3-drop, so couldn't use her for that. But in theory, if you can get her out, she is even more powerful. You give something charge and you give it +2 attack, and what I got in this deck is pretty heavy hitting already anyway, so that would have made a good addition. Next up, we have 2 Afrith. I didn't want to stack too heavy on Afrith because the whole point was to have the charge mechanic on here, but I didn't want to not include Afrith because her ability is once per turn, you may discard a card from your hand to give all your fighters charge. So you get her out on the field and you just slap down a bunch of fighters, you give them all charge, and they're good to go. And I mean, the line is that simple, but it is hugely effective. And anybody that played me in the online Discord tournament there will tell you how bad it is to face Afri when you get 1 or 2 of them out, when you get other fighters in play too. But next up, we have Jonesy himself here. We've got the Narwhal, and this one was kind of, I needed something low cost in case I couldn't pull any of my my Afri line, but also I loved its ability, and it actually played a very key piece in my deck, which is your opponent may not activate surprises in response to this fighter summoning or for the first turn this is in play. So essentially you use those and you negate any surprises that your opponent may play. So if you got some pretty heavy spells or something you want to play, you slap down Narwhal and you start going heavy on your spells. They can't negate anything by surprises, so you're all set on that. And I think it would have worked well against Jonesy's deck had I actually played it. And yes, I did have a chance to play it, and I goofed, but it's okay. It's okay. Next up, we have Hardy, and this is where we start to get into the Dancers. And Dancers are a new fighter type from Harmonic Surge. Now, Hardy has 4 life, and it's a 4 cost. It's a Dancer that's immune to binding and has Last Dance, which is if this fighter is at 1 health, then its attacks, when it attacks, draw a card and give it a +1 attack token before dealing damage. And then her actual attack is Releve Rush for 2 damage, and it says give adjacent fighters +2 attack. So in theory, you want to slap her down and slap fighters on the other side that are going to be heavy hitters as well. And if you have a Frida in there as well to give one of those fighters another +2, you could have somebody like my next fighter here, Sergeant Surge, slapping for 9 damage in 1 attack, potentially. So 2 of Sergeant Surge in this deck, and I kind of wanted to do more, and maybe I should have, but he played a pretty good part too. He's another Dancer with Last Dance and Crescendo. Every time this fighter attacks, give it a +1 attack token at the end of turn. So he's a 5 cost, but he's got 6 health and 2 armor, which armor played a huge role in this deck. You'll find out that a lot of my fighters have armor, and it was massive on stopping people from wiping my board. But his attack already does 5 damage, so he's a pretty heavy hitter himself. And it was really good to have him in here. Next up, we have Olayip. Now, Olayip, another Dancer, give this fighter a +1 attack token for each other Dancer in play. Obviously, this mechanic feeds off of the other Dancers, and since this is a dance deck, it boosts itself up and powers itself up pretty quickly. Now, being a 6-drop, it was a little expensive, but when you did get it out, you have 7 life, 2 armor, and its attack, Fan Flare, which does 5 damage, and draw and reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a mech fighter, this does 3 more damage. And since all of these Dancers are mechs, thought there's a pretty decent chance you're going to pull a mech and do 3 additional damage. And again, you could probably see at this point, this is all about stacking damage as fast as possible and hitting as hard as fast as you possibly can. I think this deck might even give Mini Minnow a run for his money with his deck that he has that's built around the same principle, give things attack tokens quickly and let them hit hard. Bohemip, we ran 4 of Bohemip. He was honestly like the star of the show. He was the one I drew the most that I could slap down and play for 4 cost. He's got 4 life, 2 health. He's got the give this fighter a +1 attack token for each other Dancer in play. And then his attack, Bite the Dust, is 5 damage. And it has summon a 1 health, 0 attack Dancer token. So you slap a couple of these bad boys down. You're getting Dancer tokens every turn. They are just boosting themselves up in damage fast. You couple that with a Frida, you couple that with Hardy, and oh man, you're going to be swinging hard very quickly. And then the last 2 fighters we had are Thrillip. Now these ones I played a lot less than the others. But they were pretty much good for defense. So he's got the ability, give this fighter a +1 attack token for each other Dancer in play, which was really good. He's 6 life with 2 armor, a 5 cost, and his beat up attack just says if this attack targets a turnip or evolution of turnip, the target is destroyed, and it does 4 damage. So it's a decent fighter with good life and armor, which really slows people down. And I thought, people might be playing the turnip line given all of its evolutions and how it's like the Eevee of Nostalgix. And I thought it might be good to have a couple of those just in case to get the quick relief from them. I never did run into any turnips though. So we have our equipment now. We are getting into Fanny Pack. I only ran 1 copy of this. I originally had like 2, but I kind of figured I don't think I'm going to be storing that much mana in it because a lot of extra mana I can just use to create tokens. So I didn't think I really needed it, but I put 1 in there just in case I needed to pull something out. I did only use it 1 time. So next up we have Team Jacket. So Team Jacket is essentially a proxy of Team Uniform. but from Harmonic Surge. Gain +1 attack for each fighter and token you control. Now, obviously, the more tokens and stuff you get into play, more fighters, you slap this down on something else and it gives it even more firepower. That would have been really good, especially against Jonesy's deck too, but I did not pull... I pulled a couple of them, and they just... When you're playing very quick, fast games, you don't need them as much. It's more for like longer games when people are defensing up quite a bit. But speaking of defense, I had 2 spells in here, armor up, or 2 of the armor up spells, which gave 2 of your fighters +2 armor. Now, that actually came in handy a few times, because again, giving things armor allows you a moment to breathe, essentially. If your opponent has 2 or 3 fighters, and you have armor on some things, you know it's going to take at least 2 fighters to kill it. And it kind of buys you time. If you need time, it kind of buys you some. Next up, next spell, we have Chain Lightning for 3 cost. Deal 3 damage to a fighter and 1 damage to fighters adjacent to it. This was really good at taking out small level fighters and taking out tokens along with it. That one proved to be actually pretty handy most of the time. Next up, we have Double Time, and I only had 1 copy of this. I originally had more than this in here, but I kind of figured the tokens weren't really the focus of the deck unless I could get a bunch of Dancer tokens out. And I kind of felt for a 6-drop, for that late in the game, it wasn't going to be as prudent, but I had to keep at least 1 just in case to do as much damage output as possible. So I did leave 1 in. I don't think I used it at all in the tournament, but it was good it was a good discard card that I knew I wouldn't need. But next up we have Gamatron Slice, one of the newer staples, I would honestly say, from Harmonic Surge. This one is a 7-drop spell, and it says deal damage to anything equal to half the quantity of cards in all players' voids rounded down. So, like what Jonesy did with that card is he would void out his entire deck. So you think you got a 50 card deck, you voiding in there, you're going to be doing between like 20 and 25 damage just on your void alone, not including the other person's void. Gamatron Slice is hitting for 20 or something damage. That's pretty massive. So I threw it in there just in case I ran across a mill deck and somebody was trying to mill me out fast. I wanted to have at least 1 or 2 of those in my hand, so that way I could slap it down on their hero or something and kind of do the, the reverse, the no you. So that is why that was in there. It came in pretty handy a couple times too, I will say. Next up is Frog of Greed. We had 2 copies of that in this deck, and it is a draw 2 cards. Simple as that. You just need some cards in your hand. There you go. Now we're getting to the surprises, and this card right here, Laser Barrier, proved to be as good of a card, if not better, than advertised. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Laser Barrier. And no, I did not throw it in here just because it has Valhalla on it. The ability of this card is phenomenal. Negate an attack. No additional fighters can attack this turn. Your opponent's cards cost 1 more mana to play for the rest of their turn. That is huge. That stopped my enemies in their track a few times. And when you got a mechanic like Afri and a Frida that's giving things charge as soon as they hit the field, man, you really control the board state. I tell you that. Next up, we have 2 of Mixtape. Now, I will say I threw Mixtape in here because I had an understanding of how the card worked, which it was not how the card worked. So it says pay any amount of mana to play the surprise face down. You may counter any opponent spell that costs 1 more mana than you paid for the surprise and use its effect as your own immediately. I misread that. I thought it was any spell up to that cost. So I thought if I paid 5 mana or 6 mana, let's say, I could play any card or any spell that my opponent cast for 7 mana or less. And it wasn't the case. It had to be the exact mana value of what your opponent had. And that one proved to be very ineffective for me. So you might want to keep it in your deck for certain cases, but you might want to remove it. There's certain situations where it would come in handy there's also certain situations where it might bite you in the butt. So just be careful. We had 2 reverse, good old classic staple, negated surprises activation. Gotta have those in there. I honestly don't know that I could build a deck that does not have these in here. I'd be a little surprised, but we also had 2 Nope, another classic staple in here. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, counter it. And the final 2 cards we have in this deck are arenas. So I had New Game Plus. All fighters deal 2 more damage after weakness and resistance. All spells, equipment, and surprises cost 1 less to play. So this I got to play a handful of times, and it is magnificent. I know it helps your opponent out as well, but when you have things like Laser Barrier in place, you've got some dancers on the field, and you have Afri or Afrida or a couple of them that can give things charge, man, you are going to be slapping your enemy around fast with this. And that's what it's there for, is what happened. Next up, I had Gated Event. So no evolution fighters may be placed onto the field. This includes those returned to the void or played by a card's effect. During a player's turn, they may discard up to 2 level 2 or higher fighters from their hand to gain half the combined mana cost of those fighters rounded up as temporary mana. So that essentially, I knew a lot of people would be playing fighters that would need to evolve or level up. And since mine does not really run that, Afrida, the Afri, Afrida, and Afrith line was really the only one that I had that evolved. And you could really make do with just Afri in this deck. I figured that is a very good way to nullify and negate some of my opponents. Unfortunately, I did not get to play it at all in the tournament. I think I only drew it like 1 time, and it was kind of not necessary, but it's a pretty good card. It keeps your opponents at bay, low leveled, and allows you to build up and swing at them hard. So there you go. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the DDR deck that I built for this latest Nostalgix online Discord tournament that landed me in the championship game. I think it's a pretty good deck. I did throw it together kind of quickly, but there is method, there is reason to the madness here. And it is battle tested. Again, you can go watch Jonesy on Jonesy's channel. There's a video of me going up against his Shiga deck. Make sure you go watch it. Go subscribe to Jonesy as well. He's an awesome content creator and gameplay person for Nostalgix. You definitely don't want to miss out the cool shenanigans he's coming up with. But like I said, there is gameplay footage of that deck on here, and I will likely do more footage of this deck as well for future use. But that's all we got, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this deck, what you would do to improve this deck, or, if you think it's perfect the way it is. I'm sure it's not, but if it is, let me know. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That's all we have time for today. Thank you once again for hanging out with me during this awesome deck tech, and we'll see you guys in the next one.